Hello, and I want to thanks again the organizers, and I'm up here again. So I'm giving you I gave an overview presentation yesterday on household air pollution, and I mentioned this thing called Clean Household Energy Solutions Toolkit. And so I'm coming from a very different angle. I'm taking all the research you all prepare, and I'm actually translating that for actual policymakers and people, technocrats on the ground, and ministries of health, ministries of environment, ministries of energy to actually use and apply. So just quickly. I didn't mention yesterday that we don't necessarily need more data. I love the data that you are getting. We just don't want countries, just to clarify, we don't want countries going out and scaling up innovation or interventions just because they need initial baseline data. That was my point, just to clarify. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into the Clean Household Energy Solutions Toolkit. And I hope that maybe you'll see some places where some of your research could help inform or we can utilize. Find some options. Something else I really wanted to highlight that I found important in both speeches to point at this, WHO are really pushing this idea. We don't want to separate household and ambient air pollution because they are so interconnected, and that we are really, for example, our STG on air pollution, the indicator 3.9.1 is actually the joint effect, the mortality rate to the joint effects of household and ambient air pollution, so that we're really connecting the dots that you need to, if you want to tackle indoor air quality, you need to be tackling outdoor air quality and vice versa. So this is a quick reminder of what we had. I went through the guidelines yesterday, the indoor air quality guidelines and household fuel combustion. This is actually the third in a series. The first ones were on dampness and mold, and we also have it on selected pollutants. So now we have the household fuel combustion guidelines on indoor air quality, with the last ones to come out. And they're specifically aimed to achieve the actual guideline values provided in these other guidelines. These ones are for the whole general outdoor ambient environment, specifically related to particulate matter, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. And this one we have specifically the pollutant value related to carbon monoxide, as that's an important pollutant in household fuel combustion. Now, these guidelines, after many years, and thanks to Lydia Moraski's great leadership in the guidelines development group, they were actually updated and launched in September 2021. So we actually have new guideline values, but they still align because these guidelines were designed to achieve these ones, but we can still make them work for this. So this is just a refresher as to what actually are the guideline values that WHO has. Again, these come after about 5, 6, 7 years of work. We gather all the different scientists to get the systematic reviews meta-analysis. We set the PICO questions, and there's a lot of back and forth with representations from all different countries, all different regions of the world included. So the initial guideline value, just as a quick update, was initially we aimed to achieve 10 micrograms per meter cubed. That has actually been lowered because we haven't found a study where you don't have any risk from any pollution. So we basically want no pollution, but that's completely unrealistic. So we have set it to 5, where it has been achieved in some places. But that's okay because the household fuel combustion guidelines are really designed to achieve 10, which is really impossible in most of these settings at the moment, that these are applied to, particularly in low and middle income countries. However, these guidelines do apply to high income countries, and we are working on trying to build up the capacity to address those, because it is an important source of indoor air quality in high income countries, and also the source of ambient air pollution in high income countries as well. And then again, the actual guideline for carbon monoxide was also decreased to 4 milligrams per meter cubed. Quick refresher of what these guidelines are, as we provide these emission rate targets, which are specifically technical recommendations. So stove designers, heater designers, they actually know, and we can actually, those people implementing or choosing the interventions at the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy, know what is the specific technical recommendations. So it's really to translate what we as the health sector want in terms of technical specifications. And then we highlight this whole idea of policy and transition, and really trying to prioritize those solutions with some health benefits in the transition, because it's going to take a long time to get to clean. And then really highlighting there's some important specific fuels, specifically kerosene and unprocessed coal. Kerosene, the evidence is a little less certain as unprocessed coal, which is raw coal. Raw coal is just nasty stuff. You have a whole bunch of different things like arsenic and stuff coming off of it, in addition to the high PM values and CO coming off it. Kerosene, again, is just a nasty mix. And there are some initial studies showing, for example, the increased relative risk for tuberculosis was 9 times of those who are using kerosenes for life. So that's a pretty huge relative risk. So hence we know that this is So nasty stuff, and we know that we could pretty much be confident that research will show it continues to be growth. And then highlighting a similar to Bill did, it's this idea of there's really a lot of combination between synergies between addressing household fuel combustion and the household air pollution and climate change. And we're really trying to get countries to understand, if you want to address climate change, then work on your household energy, because that's a really important opportunity for mitigation. And it's also in a form of adaptation too, as fuel wood, scarcity, etc. So transitioning to clean will actually help their climate adaptation aspects as well. So they're hard. These recommendations aren't easy. And so these recommendations, as I mentioned before, instead of just giving you pollutant values, we have really tried to take it where you give very specific technical recommendations, but even those technical recommendations have to be translated in specific actions. And often countries, they're like, great, you have the guidelines, what do we do now? So this is what we've really been trying to do, is we've been talking to all the different countries and different regions to find out what are the tools that you all need to actually implement them. And it's not just from the Ministry of Health. These tools are also meant for the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, all these different aspects, because it is very much requires a whole bunch of people working on this problem together. And this is where this kind of leveraging the health argument comes into play, is that you're really saying, look, guys, come on, let's all work together. We want to protect the health of our people, the health of the children, etc. So this is where we came up with CHEST, and it did take a number of years. And we have actually, as this was developed, the whole toolkit itself, we had great visions. We went ahead, and as we developed the tools, we would kind of release them and launch them separately. And each of these tools were often used by academic institutions in their projects, and actually pilot them to help us give us feedback to their application and how we could tweak and use them, and also just for their general validity in terms of the practicality, et cetera. All these things are online as now, and I actually have training videos, I believe, for every module now that kind of give countries a little bit of a sense of what they are, because indeed, you kind of look at the website, you're like, whoa, what do I do? So we kind of felt that this is an important way to get our message across a bit better. So I'm going to quickly just walk through the various modules in here so you kind of know what we're doing, and it really is designed to take countries through a full policy or program development or adaptation, because a lot of countries already have programs or policies in place, but they're very old, or they're dated, or they're not science-based. So we have to actually make sure we can adapt, or those places that have no policies at all. And so we're working with them. The first module is really about stakeholder mapping and situational assessment. So this is really a specific kind of template that walks through a desk review, so it can be done in countries very quickly in a couple of months. And we really encourage local consultants from that country to actually lead this, because after the desk review, which we walk them through the tools where they can find this kind of general background information of what's your disease rates, what are some policies, etc. It actually also requires and facilitates this engagement with the health sector, but actually has informed interviews. So they actually pushes the person developing this report to go and speak to these various ministries, and that facilitates a lot more engagement than normally would occur. And it's really designed to say, what is the various situation in the country? What's your health and energy situation? What are the policies and programs that are currently in place that might be related to health, from household air pollution to the actual use of technologies and fuels in the home, or some environmental regulations, etc. So it really tries to map them all out. And then it helps you really understand who's working on what. I really like to draw the attention to this one, because this is India. This is one of the first ones we have. These are all the people working on household air pollution and cooking solutions. There's a lot of people, right? And they're often working in very different directions, often completely opposite, right? One's recommending biogas, one's recommending improved cook stoves, one recommending LPG, etc. Or some people say, yeah, just open your window, you're fine. So, you know, it's a difference. And it's important to see who are all the different people working together on this area. So within this tool, as I said, the tool walks the user through specific, this HART, the Household Energy Assessment Rapid Tool, which was helped with MEX. They did it in Nepal with us, and we've worked with a lot of institutions, and we've done it in, I think, probably 15 plus countries now. It walks them through the specific places where you can actually find the data. So this is where I wanted to flag some of the things that you all help provide us. So this is our Global Health Observatory. So if you haven't ever visited this is actually a very interesting data source we have at the WHO, and it goes through, provides everything from information on vaccines to sanitation access to maternal mortality, morbidity, etc. So it's very nice. And we specifically, this is a bit dated, but it provides a specific disease relative risk. I mean, attributable burden for both female, male, both sex, etc. This is actually modeled estimates, but we also have access to the actual specific raw data that inputs to that if people are interested. So for example, as I mentioned yesterday, we have the WHO Household Energy Database. This is the largest source of data on the fuels and technologies used in the home for cooking, heating, and lighting. Initially, it was just cooking, but a few years ago, because considering the importance of addressing all of the sources of household air pollution in the home, or the main sources, we've expanded to heating and lighting. There's far less data on space heating and lighting available, but we're pushing it more and we're getting to see more. And it's just difficult to categorize too the heating technologies as the evidence is not as strong as it is in the cooking. So this is also available to anybody who's interested, and we have surveys and information dating all the way back, I think, to 1973. So we even have some high-income countries now. For example, Korea is in there, and Spain, back in the late 70s. So this tool, the HEART tool, also goes to the actual, as I was saying, that we have compiled data from various research, that we have the household air pollution measurements database. So this specifically goes through, and this is done within cooperation with the Sri Ramachandra University and our collaborating center with Kalpana Balakrishna. And they basically go ahead and collate all the various studies, epidemiological studies, and pull out the various factors. What were the fuels and technology used? What particular pollutants were measured, and what are the values that were there fuel stacking? Was it looking at cooking only? Was it heating and cooking going on, heating only, etc. So this is a very valuable source, I would say, for countries. Instead of jumping in and saying, oh, I need to measure everything before I do an intervention, this helps them kind of find a source of information, and it really compiles a lot of the research that's going on. So that we have this kind of stakeholder mapping. So as I said, they have this report and it comes together, and this report, the HEART report, the first step is really brings together the various stakeholders so that you can have that conversation. And the idea is to actually lead to a steering group or steering committee. It's typically not the Ministry of Health that's going to lead that, but they can bring the convening aspect of it, and then they typically nominate, the idea is to nominate a particular leader, which is often going to be the Ministry of Energy, as they are typically have the much more capacity to roll out solutions on the ground than the Ministry of Health. And so indeed, here we have, this is specifically on the various ways that we can evaluate what are the policy and technological solutions available. So we have various databases that also inform standards and cook stoves, et cetera, and then how to track their impact. So this is building on the monitoring. So these are the various steps. So we're going now to module 2, which is this identification of technological and policy interventions. And this is where we get into some of the tools. And so this is trying to look at more of this technological interventions and trying to give the cost benefit analysis. So this is the bar hat tool, and this is something the MEX program has actually helped a lot too. We're hoping that we can engage with them possibly in the future, as we're going to do version 2 to update some of the assumptions and provide some a little more flexibility in actual outputs of the various things. But it really, I would say this is everyone's favorite tool. When I go to countries like, oh yes, and these are people that have no idea how to run this thing, but they're very excited about it because it really pushes the buttons they need to have policy move. So it really looks and calculates the cost and benefits, including the health, social, climate, of up to 12 different sets of interventions. So we have everything in the transitions that you would have. So we have cooling devices to biomass stoves, those things to biogas stoves, LPG, ethanol, and you actually can do combinations of these various policy scenarios, and you end up coming out with specifically your net costs or benefits. And I can tell you, in general, we see such super overall net benefits for everything that we put in terms of transitioning from those traditional stoves to use. So you get the net present value, and this is a very important way that we can really push the argument. Something else that's really nice is this quantifies those additional impacts than rather just the specific technology and fuel being used, such as the climate impacts, CO2 equivalents, time loss, as well as the health costs to the individuals, as well as to the government system themselves. So it really pulls everything together. And it's also been designed to speak specifically to the One Health tool, which is the health systems use a lot in terms of evaluating specific interventions in the health system. In addition to that, so this is kind of more at the policy level, the last tool. And so this is really looking at the specific interventions in the home itself. So this is actually the household multiple emissions sources model. So the guidelines itself was really designed for looking at this one specifically fuel and technology and divide those emission rates. But we know that that's not the reality on the ground. So we need to really want to put together where you can actually estimate when you have multiple fuels and technologies being used at the same time, what are those emissions and how could those translate to actual exposure and relative risk. So this is the homes model, which actually allows us to put up to 3 different devices in at the same time to figure out what those emissions would be, and then you can translate that into a quote. So then we also have, so that's kind of the technical, so we have the costing, and then we have for policy interventions, then we have the technological, the homes model is one example, and then we also have the household energy policy repository. Countries like to learn from each other, and they really like to see what other countries have done. So we worked with Stockholm Environment Institute, and they helped create this household energy policy repository. We did a bunch of web scraping and really analyzed those various things. And so here we also have, in addition, they compare these to various analyses when they're available. And so again, we have other tools that are also available within this module that I would suggest you look at. I definitely don't have time to go through them all, but there's a lot there. And then being that we have standards in testing, this is an important one too, as this is actually a very critical policy thing that countries can do, and that's the development of cook stoves. The International Standards Organization is one of the only organizations that I know have developed cook stove standards. And so we have worked with, as a category liaison, to really influence our use of our guidelines, our health-based evidence into the development of their voluntary target in the ISO development in their cook stove standard TC 285, I think. So, and then we actually have worked, for example, they've actually translated the standards developed for cook stoves in Ghana, for example, to a labeling scheme, which is really to inform your consumers so they can be more informed about their choices. But this is definitely an important way. Nepal has done standards in these things. So this is an easy sell to countries to do something at a policy level. So again, we have specific information on how you voluntary performance protocols. We have performance targets so that you could actually see if you wanted to develop your own standards, what would you need for in terms of your emissions, et cetera. And then we have a guidance on really setting your own national performance targets. So this is really a how-to guide to put these in place. And we even go so far as to provide the input variables. Again, we use, I think, Colorado State helped us gather some of this background information to help us put into the homes model and these other models to predict your estimates and develop your standards. And then we have the actual protocols for how you do, if you were to gather this information yourself, how would you do it with your exchange rate, your kitchen volume, device use time, et cetera. And so then we have as monitoring and evaluation. I know I'm very short on time, so I'm close. It's almost there. We have specifically these 4 questions. As I mentioned, surveys were asking a whole bunch of weird questions, completely not able to comparable at all. And every organization was doing it differently. So WHO worked hard starting back in 2014 or something to develop these kinds of harmonized questions that look at primary fuels, cost and availability of fuel, time spent collecting fuel, household members responsible for collecting the fuel, cooking, injuries and accidents, and as well as electricity availability and use, because this is going to give us a much bigger picture in terms of the health impacts, and we can easily gather that via household surveys. Now, I can tell you, most people don't go through the full yes list. They typically go for the core questions, which is your primary fuel and for cooking and heating and lighting paired with the technology. And these were also piloted again in a variety of, I think, 12 different places around the world at various research projects. So this is also a great opportunity for us to work and use information on the ground. And then here's just the kind of thing I touched on a bit more, is this idea that we have the importance of actually using the health sector as a champion to prescribe clean air. So here are the specific modules that we have recently finished and piloted this summer in Ghana with clinicians. We have up to 12 modules finished, and we're still finalizing those related, for example, I believe we have cognitive aspects and then surveillance and monitoring, et cetera. So they're not all finished yet, but they're getting close. The ones checked are the ones specifically related to household air pollution. And then we also, to finalize this aspect, we've actually also developed clinical case scenarios so that the doctors and professionals will be presented these, and they have to figure out, oh, well, could this be related to air pollution, and what are those diseases related? And then we're developing also a clinical screening tool to help actual intake when patients come in, so that we get a sense they have to sensitize the patient itself and the doctor. So perhaps this could be a reason of exposure could be leading to the disease. For example, yes, you have a woman who's never smoked her entire life, doesn't have any of the risk factors, except she cooks over an open fire and suffering from COPD. Maybe that could be an opportunity for diagnosis and to put some guidance in terms of how they could prevent this moving forward. There we go. Thank you.